Welcome to WTF Fantasy Football Gym Day. Tony Cincotta here tonight. And Jim, if they're missing one person, you know what? They're right. We're missing one guy, but the show must go on.
Yeah, unfortunately, Brian Drake wasn't able to join us tonight, so we're going to have to go on without him. So, I don't think either one of us has really too much problem talking a little bit more.
No, I don't think so either. But I always wonder about Brian. You think is he really rich and he's part of the Drake's Cakes family and that they're home making, Hostess cupcakes right now?
Well, Drake's and Hostess, two different companies. So if they are, somebody's about to get sued.
Yeah, that's true. That happens all the time in the cupcake industry, so you never know what's going on. It's week 5 of the fantasy football season. Jim, we were talking prior to the show about some of our records and some of our leagues. I think now's the key, right? Now's the key. Week 5, you know what your team is. You have 33% of the season already gone. Most leagues last 13 weeks. Now it's about addressing your needs. I think if you're going to make trades, I think if you're going to hit the waiver wire, this is the week that you got to put it all on the table. You got to be ready to go, and we got bye weeks now.
Yeah, and we haven't even really hit the big stretch of bye weeks. First 2 weeks of bye weeks have only been 2 teams. Wait till it starts to get to be 4 and 6 teams, make it much tougher. Absolutely, this is the time where you need to be addressing. We in the first few weeks we urge you to be patient with the guys that are underperforming. Now we're starting to get to a point where you can't really wait for a lot of them anymore.
Now, be patient and you can't wait, folks, mean 2 different things. I saw a trade, and I believe it was in the Fantasy Football Talk Facebook page, but no, it wasn't. It wasn't because, Jim, you would have kicked them out, actually. Some guy said, I got offered Odell Beckham Jr. for Jared Cook. Should I do it? And when they asked, should I do it, that's when they should have been kicked out because they shouldn't have been writing in the chat room at that point. They should have just accepted. Now, don't go. We tell you have to make your move. You have to be there. But if you're 1 and 3, don't go crazy.
Well, yeah, don't go crazy, but you do have to start thinking of what's going on and what you can do better, how you can increase the point totals of your team each and every week. And at this point, there are definitely players out there, myself included, that there's guys that I really like that aren't doing well. And I have to really take a long, hard look on whether or not I can wait for them.
Jim, I'm going to be honest with people out there. This is a part where maybe I'm a failure or maybe makes me better than other people. After 4 weeks, I have a hard time throwing away my research of 6 months. I stick with it and say, you know what? It's 4 weeks, and I stick with it, Jim. What do you do in certain situations with people underachieving?
Well, it's hard. It really is hard. I'll go give you a perfect example. Larry Fitzgerald. I love Larry Fitzgerald. He's won me a lot of championships over the years. I always try to get him in every league, and it's just not working out for me this year. And at what point do we start to tell people that it's time to cut bait? When I myself have a problem cutting bait with somebody like this.
That's a great example, and I'll give you one for mine. I picked Leonard Fournette in a lot of leagues this year, right? I look at Leonard Fournette, he's a running back. There's not a whole lot of them. I look at Leonard Fournette, he's a first or second round pick. There's no way I can get value for him in a trade in most instances because I just gave it to Jared Cook for Odell Beckham. So it only takes one idiot, so you never know. But that being said, Jim, don't you feel like you have to ride it out and maybe can you sit a Larry Fitzgerald, a Leonard Fournette on the bench when you put in your lineups in week 5? Fournette, of course, is out this week. But can you see yourself going down the stretch and actually sitting a Fournette or a Fitzgerald out of your lineup?
I'm actually sitting Fitzgerald this week. I need to see him at this point. I need to see this offense come together, get him involved before, I'm ready to pile on. I have, most of my leagues, I have decent other receivers that I can play in his place until he comes back. But, there's a lot of leagues out there where people don't have that luxury and they're waiting for him and don't have the depth to really sit him on the bench. So, I'm getting a lot of questions on whether or not he should be dropped. And, I hate to say drop him. I just do. because we know what kind of player he is. We know what he can do. But at this point, you know, and the bigger kick is he's done it before with bad quarterbacks, but for some reason this offense is just not getting the ball to him.
Yeah, I think you got two situations here. You got a bad quarterback, you got a new head coach, um, and maybe it'll get better now as we go on. Jim, we talk about things that'll get better, and how about Andrew Luck? The guy put up monster numbers last week, and the week before, people were wondering, oh, is his arm okay? At the end of the game, they brought in Jacoby Brissett to fire one down. Then he goes for 388 yards passing. Well, this week we're going to ask him to play without Jack Doyle, without T.Y. Hilton, and Marlon Mack also out for the Colts at the Patriots. Any concerns about Andrew Luck this week?
Well, no, look, a lot of good things came out of that game for him. First of all, he threw the ball 62 times
Yes.
and didn't seem to have any backlash from that, which was good. He threw the ball down the field quite a few times in that game, which was good. Of course, not having T.Y. Hilton and Jack Doyle hurts. Marlon Mack, not so much. His running game hasn't really been anything, even when he's in there. So, but that definitely hurts. But all of a sudden, you got guys that are coming out of the woodwork like Chester Rogers and Zach Pascal. Let's face it, Zach Pascal isn't even known by most fantasy owners, yet he comes out and has a great game.
No, he certainly has, and that's where you go. What about with a play with Chester Rogers? Is he a guy that you'd be looking to pick up?
Yeah, absolutely. I put him, in my waiver wire article this week just because, as long as Hilton's out of there, I like Rodgers as the next man up to be in that role and get there. Whether he can do it consistently going against tougher cornerbacks is going to be hard to say. Not really counting on that a ton. But the fact of the matter is, if they have to throw the ball a lot, Luck will throw the ball. And just based on amount of throws, you have to figure there's going to be a few guys here that's going to catch some balls.
And where can people check out your waiver wire article?
They can go to findingchancefantasy.com to see it right on the homepage there, and a bunch of other good articles up as well right now. A streaming tight end and streaming defense article by Casey Royer is a real nice article she does every week. So, yeah, we got some good stuff going on over there.
Now, one of the things that I'm looking at this week, of course, at the tight end position, he's been playable for the last few weeks, so I think this week he'll get a little bit of an upgrade. And Eric Ebron will be in a lot of lineups across the league against the Patriots defense.
Yeah, you have to figure absolutely Ebron is going to be in there. First week back 2 weeks ago, he didn't have such a great game. Last week, a little bit better. This week, going against New England, is going to be a tough matchup for him. They've only given up 11 passes to tight ends so far in the season. So not a huge thing there, but at the same time, they really haven't faced any major tight ends. So this might be their first test.
Well, last week, the New England Patriots got on track, so I'm going to ask the question I think most people know the answer to. If you have Julian Edelman, you just throw him in, right?
Hey, if I have Edelman, and where I do have Edelman, I am going to throw him in. It's not like he's coming back from injury. He's had plenty of time to practice. Him and Brady are on the same page. Brady may be without Gronk this week. I think he plays, but we just don't know yet. He hasn't practiced much this week. I think he got in a limited practice today, so that's going to be a little bit of a concern whether or not he plays. But yeah, I think if Edelman's in there, you got to go to him. He's definitely the guy that Brady is going to be looking for over the middle on those short intermediate routes.
Speaking of Brady being back, how about Sony Michel and the performance he put together? And I don't understand if Nick Chubb had had 2 long runs, how he only had 3 carries in that game for the Cleveland Browns.
Well, Hyde has been doing very well for them, so it's not like they got somebody in front of him that's been doing nothing. Somebody like a Kenyon Drake or somebody and still not getting playing time. So, it is what it is. He's going to be a guy that they're going to try and use going forward, at least according to the coach. Somebody we should all definitely take his word for. But I am not a Hugh Jackson fan.
I don't know who is.
But, he showed his big play ability. I think they have to get him involved. But we also saw Duke Johnson getting more involved again. So it's going to turn into a three-headed monster there with, Hyde getting most of the work, but these other two getting enough that they could be fantasy relevant as, especially as we get into the bye weeks.
It's interesting. I think a lot of times in football, of course, it's a game we all love. It's a game we follow every footstep. But I love how you get injury reports, and one of the best one this week is DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins suffering from an ankle, hamstring, and thumb injury. Jim, there's no way that you would not play DeAndre Hopkins if he's in uniform.
Yeah, no, absolutely right, and I agree with you. It just is what it is, and these Wednesday injury reports are always interesting to me because people are so ready to bail on their players based on a Wednesday injury report when they don't realize that most players sit on Wednesday if they're hurting at all, just to try and get that extra day back before they go back out and practice, especially veterans. So don't worry so much about the Wednesday, injury reports. You more have to worry about the Friday, Saturday injury reports, practice reports from those 2 days. They give you a much better layout of what players you can expect to be on the field and not.
One injury I am concerned about, and everybody's not the same, so it shouldn't matter. But Minnesota Vikings running back Dalvin Cook, who didn't practice today, he had 10 carries in the Thursday night contest, and he all in the first half, didn't get the ball in the second half. And we saw the Leonard Fournette situations with the hamstring. How concerned are you with Dalvin Cook?
Oh, very concerned. Look, again, we keep seeing this time and time again. These guys know that injuries like hamstring stuff like that or can linger for a while, and yet they keep trying to bring these guys back too fast. Give them another week off. Let them rest another week. See if that helps. Uh, at this point, I hope they do sit him this week just to give him that extra week, but they probably won't. Guys will go out there and try to start him, and he'll end up being on a short count again and not putting up much numbers. And, it just gets frustrating for fantasy owners. But, the one thing we do know is NFL coaches really don't care about fantasy owners.
Now, and Joe Mixon looks like he'll be back with the Bengals this week. He was limited in practice today, but he was in full uniform earlier in the week. And Giovanni Bernard is actually banged up now. So Joe Mixon owners can go full force with Joe Mixon this week.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to with the way they're talking about Bernard now. We'll see more, like I said, tomorrow and Friday. Yeah, it's looking good for Mixon, and people are worried that Bernard has done so well with Mixon out. How much should they be worried about Mixon if Bernard does play? And I think Bernard will see his complement of touches, maybe 8 to 10 touches in the game. But if Mixon's on the field and healthy, that's the key. Then he'll get his lion's share of carries.
Before I get to this, I got to tell you people out there, I have a little contest, Jim, for all the people in the chat room. You ready?
Sure.
What team's running back is the most aggravating in all of fantasy football? So people in the chat room, what team's running back situation is the most aggravating in football? For years, it was the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick people used to get pissed off about. Jim, there's a new team to get pissed off about every week.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now you got Seattle. All of a sudden, Chris Carson is late scratch, and Mike Davis comes off the bench to be the main guy. Everybody expects Penny to be the guy, and it doesn't happen. Penny is actually outed by the coaches saying he's a special teams player now. So now you don't have a three-headed monster, which what I thought would happen when it first happened, but you still have a two-headed not committee there, timeshare there between Carson and Davis. Now Davis looked good. Davis looked better than Carson has all season. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes forward.
Well, for me, it's the Philadelphia Eagles because it doesn't matter who's in uniform, who's not in uniform. And this week, people that have Jay Ajayi will be all fired up, including myself, because I drafted him in a couple leagues as my third running back. And you got Darren Sproles and Corey Clement probably going to be out this week. And still, they'll bring guys off the practice squad to play in the running back with Jay Ajayi.
Well, you probably see a lot of Wendell Smallwood. He's been playing pretty well for them last 2 weeks, so it'll be interesting to see if that trend continues. How much trust they actually have in Ajayi to carry the full load, or if they do split it up between him and Smallwood.
I think you'll see Josh Adams come off the bench too. They throw everyone out there.
Well, they tried to throw a little Josh Adams in before, and Smallwood actually outplayed him tremendously. So, I agree. Most of these teams are going to do this. They don't care about your fantasy team. They're trying to win football games.
Just a side note, Jim, I don't understand the commissioner of the National Football League. Robbie Anderson will not be going for any suspension this year, despite being arrested the two last off seasons.
Yeah, that's it. Man, don't get me started on the NFL commissioner and suspensions and things like that. It is so just off the hook. Whatever he wants to do, he does. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just there's no rhyme or reason to how it comes off at any time. And they keep saying they're going to put it down on paper and what what the punishments are for whatever you do, and it still never comes to that. So, yeah, this is one of the things to me that's been the most frustrating ever is that you just never know what's going to happen to these guys, and it concerns. It really hurts fantasy players when they're trying to figure out a draft. Look what happened to Sean McCoy's draft value just because the thought of suspension happening. Of course, now it's his play that's killing his value, not the suspension, but the suspension really put a crimp in his draft stock going into the late season drafts.
But for all the people out there joining for the first time, we play a little game called Fact or Fiction. I'll make a statement, and Jim will go fact or fiction, and then we'll discuss it. So, question number one, Jim. Taylor Gabriel, Bears wide receiver, is a must-own player in 12-team leagues. I actually talked to a member of the Bears staff this week, and Taylor Gabriel, we talked about, Jim. Fact or fiction?
Well, I don't know if he's a guy you want to have in your lineup owned. The fact of the matter is he's seeing a lot of targets. This offense finally got started this week. Of course, going against the Tampa Bay defense can do that for you. But the fact is that Gabriel has seen a lot of targets on the year. He's already got 29 targets through 4 games. Not bad. He's caught 22 of them for 193 yards and 2 touchdowns. Of course, those 2 touchdowns came in this big explosion game by Mitch Trubisky, who, while I thought Allen Robinson would be a great play in this game, didn't really look at Allen Robinson very much. So go figure.
I'll tell you what, Taylor Gabriel to me is an absolute lock to be in your lineups. I think, though, with his size and durability concerns, he's never had a regular role in the NFL, that it won't last you the whole season. But, Jim, I think with that Bears offense and them looking to put the ball in the air, you got to put this guy in your lineups while he's out there.
Yeah, no, I get you. There's definitely a lot of players I would play him over right now. And but let me ask you this simple point: would you play him over a guy like Larry Fitzgerald?
You know what? That's a great question, and I generally don't do anything like that. But yes, I would. Like if I was making a team for 1 week, and depending on the opponent, but the Bears, like if the Bears are playing a good team, I feel even better about it because they'll throw even more. I love that he's on the field all the time. Yeah, I would do it.
Yeah, see, I have problems with that, and that's my
I
own
would have
personal
problems.
bias.
To be
You know,
honest, I would be. I would change it 18 times.
yeah, right. That's there's just certain players I like more than others, and even when they fall off the cliff, sometimes I have a hard time sitting them, and I know that about myself. I try to correct that on my own, but it's just sometimes you just get to these guys that you just like in this case with Gerald, he's won me a lot of tournaments, yeah, a lot of championships. So I feel bad sitting him, but sometimes you just got to walk away from that.
I absolutely do. Coming back this week, we talked about Mr. Julian Edelman. Also, Mark Ingram of the Saints is coming back. Both guys a start this week.
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, Ingram should go right back into his role of, 15 touches in the game and do plenty of it with it. I don't expect anything less. They've been running. Um, Jeez, the really great running
Kamara,
back.
Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, Kamara. Jeez, I hate when I do that. Total brain fart there, folks. Sorry about that. Been running Alvin Kamara a little bit too much for their liking. So he'll go back to his normal, you know, 12, 15 touches a game. And, he works so well with that. He's so efficient with those numbers that you really don't need to push those numbers too high for him. So yeah, I absolutely think Mark Ingram is a guy I'm going to put back in my lineup. Same thing with Julian Edelman. Look, Brady and Edelman just have a thing together, and Brady has been chomping at the bit to get Edelman back on the field because he doesn't really have anybody else that he can constantly count on.
All right. I'm going to get a little deep here for people out there. I don't think at any time, the way the running back position is in the NFL, you should go trading running backs. But you have Alvin Kamara right now, and you play in a league where people aren't listening to podcasts, people aren't watching fantasy stuff. They might not realize the effect of Ingram coming back and what a job they both did last year. And then if I could get two good players, I might consider making a 2-for-1 trade for Alvin Kamara at this point in the season.
Okay, well, give me your idea of what two good players are, because I mean, I'm not ready to give up on Kamara with the way he's
I'm not
playing.
ready to give him up either, but if I could get a Devonta Freeman and a Schuster, I might make that move.
The only way I make that move is if I'm really hurting at wide receiver and need somebody to step in. That's the only way. Look, the difference between Kamara and Freeman to me is huge.
I agree.
Yeah, I've never been a huge Freeman guy anyway. Tevin Coleman, steals enough of his value, especially in PPR leagues, that it really hurts him. He's not 100%. So if I'm looking to trade Kamara, I mean, I'm not, but if I was, I would still be looking for a top flight running back and then another piece.
All right, how about Melvin Gordon and Schuster?
That I would do. I would do that in a heartbeat. Gordon is a guy who's getting it done as well. And then when you get the second player of Juju Smith and the way he's playing right now, then absolutely that's a play.
Yeah, so people out there, think about what you're going to do. And you're at the week 5, as we talked about, and go ahead and jump at a situation like that. Like Jim, I said, it's a hard to trade a top flight running back. There's just not enough of them. And to think and watch every week, it would be tough to do. But I would consider it if I was 1 and 3.
Yeah. Again, you got to try and figure out something to make a change when you're getting off to a slow start. And I have a few teams like that. I'll admit, got killed by a few injuries early on, and definitely got some players that aren't playing up to par. So you got to make some choices, and sometimes that a choice like that, giving up a good player to try and bring in more depth when you need it, is something that you need to do. I totally understand that. But I'm not going to sell him short. If I'm going to sell a Kamara or somebody like that, or Gurley or somebody like that to get 2 players, I still want 2 damn good players.
People that drafted Leonard Fournette in the first round are scratching their head, but they shouldn't be the only ones, because there's a worse first-round pick out there right now. And that, of course, is the Pittsburgh Steelers' Le'Veon Bell, who has brought you nothing through 4 weeks of the season. Jim, is this a guy that people should be acquiring, or now it's, I have no idea what's going to happen, lay off?
I don't have any idea what's going to happen, but I say acquire him. Yeah, I think he plays somewhere this year. I still think it's going to be with Pittsburgh, but who knows? We just don't know. But I do think he's going to play somewhere in the second half of the season. I do think he's going to be healthy. He's going to be fresh. And you're going to get a healthy Le'Veon Bell for the stretch down the second half of the season. So, yeah, no, absolutely. I've been trying to go out there and reach out and see what if I could pry him away from owners. But, now that they're talking about him coming back week 7, there's people hesitating on that side. There's people looking to dump James Conner as soon as they can. Look, we really don't know what's going to happen. We've heard this guy say he was going to come in week 1. It didn't happen. Now he's saying he's coming in week 7, just before the trade deadline, so he can sign his paperwork, get his game check, maybe get traded. We don't know what's going to happen with this, but I do think we're going to get Le'Veon Bell for the second half of the season somewhere.
I'll tell you what, it's interesting when you look at the Le'Veon Bell situation and try to evaluate James Conner. Now, I think the points come from the running back position in that offense. And I don't believe Connor's a great running back. I think he's a guy that has an opportunity in a good offense. And to me, when you look at it statistically, it's a lot like the situation in San Diego with the running back, right? He doesn't have a great yards per carry. He actually is being outperformed by Austin Eckler if you look at every time that they touch the ball. Yet you can't ignore them because they're in the offenses that suit passing to the running back. And it seems that's what's going on with Pittsburgh and Connor. I don't think it's a great play, but you can't dismiss him because in that offense, he's always going to be relative.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he's got a great matchup this week. So I think he's definitely somebody you want to play this week. His numbers have gone down from that great week one. At that point, I'm pretty sure it was Pittsburgh trying to show Bell that we can do it without you and force feed him the ball all game. Well, we've seen those numbers come down. We've seen that stop working so much. And it'd be interesting to see. A lot of people are questioning whether to start him this week. Hey, going up against that Atlanta team, I'm starting him. That team is just very bad. They've had so many injuries on that defense that they are just giving up a ton of yards, a ton of points to almost every position.
Now, Jim, last week is one of the craziest weeks from the quarterback position that we'll see all season long. Mitchell Trubisky, David Carr, Marcus Mariota, and Blake Bortles were all in the top 10 in week 4. Do you see one of these guys continuing their excellence the rest of the season?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I really am liking what I'm seeing out of Dalton, no doubt about it. He's playing some good football. He's got the guys playing around him very well. He's definitely getting it done at this point. It's hard to believe him not continuing with this. He's been averaging almost 25 points a game, fantasy points a game, in a standard type scoring. I know there's many leagues with different type scoring, but in a standard type scoring league, he's scoring about that many points a game. So I don't really hate it. Joe Flacco's been playing really well. Bortles, it really comes down to Bortles on whether or not he's got a running game going. If Fournette's not there and Yeldon's really not happening, then Bortles just going to keep dropping back and throwing the ball. And we've seen that he's got a couple of good young receivers that he likes that he can get the ball to. So these are guys that absolutely can continue to make it happen, whether or not they stay in the top 10, top 12. It might be a little iffy, but there are a lot of bigger names that are being outperformed by these guys.
I'll tell you what, I believe in all of them except Mitchell Trubisky. But in that offense, I think he's going to get enough throws that he might actually be relative. But I think Trubisky put it all together last week. But Dalton's actually got weapons this year. I really love the weapons that they're pulling out at the wide receiver position. We've seen the emergence of Tyler Boyd. We've seen Ross get deep on a game. Now he's a little bit banged up. They lost Tyler Eifert there, but Tyler Croft last year stepped in and played well. I like Dalton going forward. And Blake Bortles, you talked about the Jaguars' young wide receivers. They actually lead the league in drop passes. So Bortles, even that game that was 9-6 against Tennessee, where the numbers weren't that good, if you watch the game, he had a lot of drops and a tipped interception. I think Bortles has come a long way this season.
Oh, absolutely. It started the season out strong too. Absolutely. I agree. There were a lot of people saying, "Oh, early on that they should go out and get Des Bryant, whatever." They don't have a real good receiving core, but yet they do actually have a pretty damn good receiving core. D.D. Westbrook has been playing well. Keelan Cole's had a couple of good games. Dante Moncrief has had a couple of good games. Nobody has really stepped forward and taken that number one role. But for them, they don't care. They're putting up fantasy points. I mean, well, they're putting up real points. For us, they're giving us fantasy points. We just never know who's going to be the one we want to start each week.
Absolutely. That's going to be the frustrating part for fantasy owners. Westbrook's obviously, to me, the most talented one, but he's had the problems with the pass routes. He's had the problems with the drops. But you saw the kind of talent he has there. I think Keelan Cole's the most consistent, and they have a rookie Chalk that they actually think is the best player out of them all, but he's totally looks like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah, it seems like he's having a hard time learning the playbook, and that happens with a lot of rookies. So, give him a little time, and he'll get into that play. But look, Bortles can throw the ball. If you give him enough chances, he'll put the ball where he needs to put it often enough that he'll score your fantasy points. It really comes down to how many attempts does he need to make in a given week. As long as he's throwing the ball for over 40 times, then you could probably look for a pretty good fantasy game.
We saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go back to Jameis Winston. And Jim, is this the right move for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Oh, hell no. Jesus Christ, hell no. You know, if I was Fitzpatrick at halftime of that game, I would have gotten dressed and went home. I really would have. Look, I'm sorry. You're going against the Chicago defense, one of the best defenses in the league. There's no way Winston's doing any better than Fitzpatrick is. Fitzpatrick has got you 2-1 at that point, again, in games that he shouldn't have won. They weren't expected to win. Just really bad coaching, in my opinion. Winston is not the future for this team, and he shouldn't be in there now.
You know, Jim, it's hard to argue that, right? It's hard to argue that. But he was the first round pick. Fitzpatrick's a guy that's been coming off the bench for 12 years in the NFL. I think they made the move because they can go back to Fitzpatrick if they have to. I think it's a bad move for a team that was playing well, and the offense was surely outplaying what everybody expected. So I get it, but I think it's a move they had to, and I think that we're going to see Ryan Fitzpatrick again before the year is over.
Man, if I was Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'd say no. I really would. I'd be like, screw you. Go back to that young pup or whoever else you want. Screw that. Look, Fitzpatrick was playing great ball. Could he continue that all year? We'll never know at this point. But it was only a couple of years ago that he threw for 4,000 yards and 31 touchdowns. So he can get it done over a full season. He had the weapons that he's never had before surrounding him in Evans, Djax. These are guys that go to, and now all of a sudden you're going to hand it back off to a Winston who's hesitant, not as good a quarterback, doesn't give the offense a better chance to win. And I just think it was a totally stupid move.
Jim, one of the things though, when you're watching the games and you watch the games with a bunch of people, is everybody thinks, we see on Twitter all the time, the game is fixed and people go crazy and people complain. Jim, in your opinion, do the referees have any influence from the Las Vegas point spread or any of the games affected by the point spread?
You know what? I have to believe they don't. And I'll tell you why. Because if I ever found out they did, that would be the last football game I ever watched. Not into rigged sports in any way, shape, or form. Can't watch, wrestling or boxing or any of that because I worry about that. But when it comes down to football, I got to hope that they're not doing that. Um, you know, that would really just be the end all for me.
Here's the thing is people, like, when you're watching a game, it's always the home team that people feel like gets screwed, or it's the one team. So how do you judge who the referee would bet on? Like, I like Jim, I can't even comprehend it would be there. And last time I looked, there's like 8 officials in the game, right? So are they all being paid off by whoever that they bet on? I mean, all these guys are lawyers by day. They make a pretty good living off the field in the NFL. They're a bunch of old guys. Are we paying all 8 of these guys off?
Well, you don't really need to pay all 8 of them off. You really just need to pay 1 or 2 off, a referee or a linesman, and somebody who can make the calls that need to be made when they need them made would really get the job done. So you don't need to have the whole crew. But I gotta hope it's not there.
We have replays now, too, that we see every single play. You would think the NFL would have the ability to track and see some patterns in some of these referee movements if that was the case.
Well, they do. They do track everything that these refs do. They have to go to school. They have to get graded on everything they do now. But again, this is the NFL doing it. So to me, that doesn't really equate to being something you can count on as being real, because they're not going to come out and say their refs are bad, or they're not doing what they're supposed to do. The one thing I do like better this year is that they've decided that if they go to review and it's not clear cut on the review, they stay with whatever was called on the field. And I like that idea. I always have. Refs are tasked to do a hard job trying to call this game in real time, you know, making those quick, instant decisions. That's not an easy thing to do in any way, shape, or form, especially to the level that they have to do it at. So I like the fact that they've gone away from, if it's before we've seen them with the instant replay where it didn't really be conclusive and yet they would change the call. I like the fact that they finally stopped doing that.
Jim, I got to tell you this, and this might baffle your mind, and fantasy football players, this might change your mind on maybe people have too much time. So every single day for the Major League Baseball season, I get a report that tells me whether the umpire is favorable to the pitcher, where he's unfavorable to the pitcher, or he's neutral. What if we had statistics in fantasy football on referees on how many flags they throw per game?
Yeah, right. I know they do. I know some people do. We've seen it. I mean, you could look on Twitter and see people tweeting out, "Well, this officiating crew has thrown the most flags of any of them." So there's definitely people keeping track of that. Unfortunately, I'm not, but there's definitely people out there keeping track of which crews called the most penalties.
It's a crazy world. See, I don't know how this is the thing. We have so many stats now. We have so much available to us. I don't know how the referees in football could help you with that information. Like, I don't know how to use that to my advantage.
Yeah, I don't know how to use that to my advantage either. I just know that if I'm watching a game with a referee crew that loves to throw a ton of flags, I'm going to be highly frustrated by the end of the game as they keep stopping it for these stupid flags.
Jim, I got questions from Fantasy Football Talk, which, of course, everybody could go ahead and join. Tell people how to go and join the group because Jim, every day, he's contemplating whether to shut it off, allow more people in, because Jim gets a headache from going up and down and watching all these questions.
Yeah, we got almost 1,800 people in the group now. I can't imagine. Finally got somebody else to help me as a moderator just because it got to be too much. But literally, all you have to do is go search Fantasy Football Talk on Facebook and just ask them to join, and I'll let you in. It's crazy, but I was going to open it totally up so people wouldn't even have to ask. But then I started seeing an influx of people from other countries trying to get in, and as soon as they got in, they were trying to sell something.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a crazy thing. So I try to look at the people that want to get in, and as long as they have some kind of interaction with football at some point on their profile, they're in.
They're in. That's it. So, guys, get in now because Jim's feeling very festive, and I think by the end of the year he's going to shut it down. But he does have help now, so don't take that chance. Get in there and get it done. First question this week: who do I start in Week 5? Jarvis Landry or Mr. Brandon Cooks?
Ooh, yeah, both. Absolutely both. I want both of those guys in my lineup each and every week, no doubt about it. I want to know who they're starting that they have to make this choice. Look, Landry to me is one of the best receivers in the league. Doesn't get the rep for it, but he is one of the best. I put him right on par with a guy like Beckham Jr. I do. He always involved in the game plan. He always gets a ton of targets. And you know what? I'm never sitting him. But then to me, Cooks is that guy also in this Rams offense. Finally found an offense that can use him to his skill level and get him involved each and every week. So, these are guys that, I'm not sitting unless I have, like an OBJ and a Hopkins in front of them.
I'll tell you what, I agree with you. And I've always been a Jarvis Landry fan. So I can't stop that Raiders offense. They play the Seahawks. The Rams offense. They play the Seahawks this week. I would have to go Brandon Cooks, and it would kill me to go that route, but I would have to go Cooks.
Yeah, I don't know if I could go Cooks. I think I would have to go Landry. I don't know. Cooks coming off that crazy game last week. They just put up so much points, but it's so hard to count on that from them every week because most games he doesn't have to throw that much. So that's really a concern when quarterback doesn't have to throw that much. But yeah, I get it. I guess go Seattle too, going against Seattle. But then Landry's going against Baltimore. This is a tough one. I would probably go back and forth on this a lot. And you know what? This is one of those things where if I'm having this question each and every week, this is one of these players is a player I'm going to pick to look to move to see if I could build up another position.
Speaking of another position, I got a question from Michael McGuire. Says, should I trade Cooper Kupp for Devonta Freeman? I say no. Cooper Kupp's part of that Rams offense. It's high flying, one of the best in the league. And Devonta Freeman's a guy that's been shaking off injuries the last 2 seasons. I could see it. If you need a running back and nobody else will give you a running back, Jim, I could, do it and sit there with my fingers crossed. But generally, I don't want to make this trade.
No, I hear you. It's hard to trade for an injured running back, but like I said, if it comes down to a fact where you need a running back, your guys like aren't doing anything, and Freeman is coming back, and they're not, like a Fournette or something, then maybe you do have to make that move. You don't like it, but maybe you do. But I agree with you. Cooper Kupp, coming off a great game, like I said, that whole team had a great game. But he's been pretty much involved each and every week and pretty consistent as well. So, it would be really hard for me. I would absolutely have to be in dire need at running back.
All right, this is a great question right here. A lot of people in the fantasy sports industry, fantasy football hosts, say you can wait on quarterbacks, right? You can wait on quarterbacks in your draft. This guy's got a trade offer that he can send Mike Evans his way for Patrick Mahomes, and nobody's been hotter than Mahomes. He set some records. Would you take Mike Evans for Pat Mahomes?
Yeah, if I had another strong quarterback. Look,
Cam Newton's his other quarterback.
Well, then, yeah, I absolutely would. If you don't want to trade Mahomes, then I would trade Newton. I would absolutely trade one of those two because otherwise they're just sitting on your bench. If you can get a strong skill position player for that, running back or wide receiver for that quarterback, absolutely, I would do that in a heartbeat. Um, you know, let's face it, Mahomes was drafted as a number 2 quarterback. Of course, right now he's playing lights out as the number 1, but he was still drafted that way, which means most teams that have him have a strong number 1 ahead of him or an underperforming number 1, I guess. If you look at Rodgers and Brady, pretty much underperforming where you expect them to so far in the season. But if it's somebody that has been playing well, like Cam Newton, then absolutely I would look to move one of those guys.
A question from Tyrone Borders. Who do I play in the flex this week? Calvin Ridley, Will Fuller, Philip Lindsay. Lindsay's got the Jets this week. Calvin Ridley is got the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I got to be honest, that Steelers secondary is trash. Calvin Ridley's a guy that I thought coming into the league was a steal for the Falcons on draft day. And he's not getting a lot of targets, but he's reaching the end zone. I'd go there and Philip Lindsay at running back for the Broncos. Still getting his touches, but it's a crowded backfield. I like Calvin Ridley.
No, you can't sit Ridley right now. Unless he just falls off the face. Right now, he's scoring the touchdowns for this offense, and this offense is putting up points. This could be a shootout between Atlanta and Pittsburgh. Both defenses are struggling. Right now, Pittsburgh is 30th in the league against wide receivers, while Atlanta's 28th. So we could see a lot of points on this one. So I want a piece of that.
Absolutely. Another good question here from Andy Vitale. Hines versus New England or Eckler versus Oakland? I think with the injury to Marlon Mack, you got to go Hines here. And you probably would have considered him before. New England letting up 5 yards per carry. I'm going there.
Okay, so it was Hines and who? I missed
Austin Eckler.
Yeah, Eckler's been getting it done, though.
He's right there. No, he was right on before last week. He was in the top 12 in running backs.
Yeah, no, absolutely getting it done. But I think I'm with you. I think Hines will be very used again this week like he was last week in the passing game, basically as a running back with short passes, and that fits his game very well. So I can't get away from that. Eckler's been doing a lot with, a little bit of touches, but he keeps getting it done. That's a tough one for me. I think in a PPR league, though, I think I do go with Hines this week just to look for those, hopefully 7 or 8 catches.
Another flex question we got: Emmanuel Sanders versus the Jets, Devonta Freeman against Pittsburgh, Tyler Boyd against Miami, and Alex Collins. I'll tell you what, Emmanuel Sanders has been the guy that's been the target in that Denver offense. Devonta Freeman coming back this week against the Pittsburgh defense. We go porous. I like what Tyler Boyd's there. I'd probably take the shot, Jim, and go with Freeman in the game that I think has the biggest point total of the week. I go Devonta Freeman against the Steelers, and I'll tell you my second choice is Emmanuel Sanders out of that group.
Well, I got to say this, Pittsburgh, while they're giving up a ton through the air, is not giving it up on the ground. They've only given up one rushing touchdown. They've only given up an average of 16.5 fantasy points a game to opposing running backs. They actually rank fourth in the league in average points per game allowed to running backs. So they're getting it done on the ground. So I'm not really a big fan of Freeman this week, even if he does play because of this matchup. Because Atlanta should be able to throw on Pittsburgh, they won't have to run much. And that's what's been limiting most people against running against Pittsburgh, is because they know they can throw against them. So, I don't see that changing. I like Sanders. Sanders is, absolutely getting it done there. Best receiver on the team right now with Demaryius Thomas just looking like a secondary guy at this point. But for me, what were the other two choices? Man, it's hard to. I should be
Tyler Boyd versus Miami, and Alex Collins versus Cleveland.
Okay, it's not going to be Alex Collins. Definitely not against Cleveland. Cleveland's defense been playing well. Collins keeps fumbling at the end, the ball, and he's going to lose goal line touches again to Buck Allen. He's going to lose other touches again to Buck Allen when they need him to run. So that's a little scary. I mean, he's putting up points, but you know what? I think I'm going to go with Tyler Boyd up against Cincinnati. Up against Miami. Look, I know Miami's been playing well on defense, but they haven't really played any major offensive teams until last week against New England. And of course, we saw Brady put up a lot of points against them. I think that trend continues right now with Dalton playing very well.
Jim, we've been too nice to people thus far. So I'm going to ask a question. Maybe we can get pissed off at somebody. Jackson Zaffi asked the question: should I trade Le'Veon Bell for Drew Brees? My current quarterback is Andy Dalton.
No, I wouldn't do that. Look, Drew Brees gives you an upgrade over Dalton, no doubt about it. Nobody's going to say otherwise. But how much of an upgrade is it to lose somebody like Le'Veon Bell, even if you only get him for half the year? The only way I make this trade is if I really, truly believe he doesn't play anywhere this year.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think with Andy Dalton, you're getting a guy that's playing really well. We talked about the weapons early in the show. What you forget is that Drew Brees last year, when Ingram and Kamara were together, was not one of the top fantasy quarterbacks and actually took a step back last season.
Yeah, but part of that was also great play by the defense that they're not getting this year.
But how much do you think with the other thing is there's no development of a number 2 wide receiver in New Orleans yet?
Yeah, that has definitely been concerning. I mean, Ted Ginn is still a number 2 there. Meredith was supposed to be somebody who would get really involved, but just never got healthy enough to get involved. So, yeah, it really hasn't come out that way. But it really comes down to how well this defense is playing. If they continue to play poorly, then Brees is going to have to keep throwing, even with the 2 good running backs. That was a big part of why he wasn't really a top quarterback last year. So I expect him to, continue playing because this defense isn't playing that well right now.
I'll tell you what, it'll be real interesting there, as you mentioned, with the New Orleans Saints and that defense. Jim, I don't know why it's so bad.
Yeah, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. Pretty much same squads, same setup. I don't know what's going on there yet. I've been trying to figure it out. I've been trying to watch tape, seeing what's happening with these guys, and there's really no one thing to pull out that says, okay, well, this unit is really terrible and it's dragging down the rest of the unit. It just seems like there's just total breakdowns across the board.
Wesley Jones asks, with Jordan Howard on a bye, should I start Mixon or Yeldon this week? This is a good question, Jim. Mixon, of course, we think is going to play, who is banged up. I like Yeldon in the matchup against Kansas City. in a game where I think, even though Jacksonville defense is the best in the National Football League, that's up to debate. They're going to have to throw the ball. And I think one thing is that Yeldon on linebackers is going to get an opportunity.
He absolutely should get an opportunity. Kansas City is 32nd in the league against opposing running backs, have already allowed 385 yards and 2 scores to them through the air alone. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeldon could definitely be that player this week that really takes advantage of that, especially with Fournette out. And I just expect him to have a solid game this week. So I can't really fault you there.
Yeah, so there you have it. Those are our picks there. And if you guys want your questions answered, you go to Fantasy Football Talk, Jim, and we'll get them on the podcast each and every week.
Absolutely. We even got some in the chat room. So let me throw a couple of these at you. Gregory Castillo wants to know, should he trade Adam Thielen for Yeldon and Landry in a standard league?
Yeah, you talked about Jarvis Landry and how good he plays. I like Adam Thielen. I think the Minnesota offense gets better. But if I'm going to bring 2 players for one, and I think that Landry and Thielen are on the same level, and I get an extra running back, Jim, I got to make that move.
Yeah, that's tough though. I would feel better about it. Look, Thielen, and I love Landry, but Thielen is playing lights out right now. First receiver in modern age to have 400-yard games to start the season. He's just playing over the top at this point. If I was getting a starting running back with Landry, now I know Yeldon is starting this week, but I want a starting running back for the league for the year, not just for a couple of weeks while Fournette is out. So for me, I wouldn't do that move only because I'd rather have Thielen right now than Landry, and Yeldon is not enough to put me over the top.
See, I guess I look at it like this, Jim. I think fantasy football is a 1 week at a time thing. And with Fournette having a setback to that injury, I'm figuring I got at least 3 weeks with Yeldon. And at that, I can figure out what to do from there.
And you probably could, but I understand what you're saying. And nobody likes, Landry as much as I do. I don't think I really like the guy. But it would be really hard for me to give up Thielen in an offense that is just clicking for him right now to the level it is. So here, let's go on. We discussed that enough.
You sold me.
Okay, what?
You sold me. Not really.
Okay, let's see if there's anything else in here. I know we had a few over there. Here we go. Eddie A wants to know, should he play Deshaun Watson over Mahomes this week?
No. Yeah, I've made that mistake in the past, right? Where you play, this defense is that great. This kid showed me something going into Denver against a very good defense, jacked up on a Monday Night Football game. If you sit Mahomes, you know what? You might be right, but you're still wrong.
See, and I agree with you. And not only that, but you do have Deshaun Watson going against a really tough Dallas defense. They are really strong against the pass on the season so far, playing really well. But the fact of the matter is, if I have these two, I want to trade one. We talked about this earlier. I don't want to have 2 good quarterbacks. I'm okay with having a backup that I know is a backup, but I don't want 2 guys that are going to be number ones each and every week because you'll never pick the right one. Trade them away, get a good position player, and get another backup quarterback if you feel the need. But I would absolutely trade one of them.
Jim, one of the guys, before we get to the next question, one of the guys that we didn't mention in today's show is a guy named Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Is he all of a sudden irrelevant with Geronimo Allison possibly missing this week with a concussion?
Well, both Allison and Cobb possibly missing this week. And then, of course, he does. I mean, even the coach named him as somebody that you should be watching and, paying attention to at this point. And I agree. I mean, this kid had a great preseason, made some really big plays. I think that's what his role will be. He's not going to be a possession receiver. He's going to be a guy who's going out there to stretch the defense. And, Rodgers can hit those throws. So absolutely somebody you should be paying attention to, but it will come down to which of these 2 or both of these 2 other receivers are sitting this week.
Yeah, Jim, so what you're telling me is I can finally give up hope I can give up hope for the possibility of I don't know, someone. Both these guys going to miss the game. Like, is there any possibility that could happen?
There is a big possibility it could happen. I mean, Cobb was out already, and Allison is under the concussion protocol. We don't know when he's going to clear that protocol.
All right, nobody's talked about this, at least that I'm aware of so far in shows. Is there a chance that Ty Montgomery plays some wide receiver this week, and if he's on your roster, you play him at running back?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, especially with the other two, if they're out, you could see a little bit of that as well. They will need, a possession receiver. Devontae Adams isn't 100% himself, so at that point, they could use somebody that could be that, short to intermediate route wide receiver. So, we saw him get a little bit more involved last week. Hopefully, that trend continues.
Yeah, it's very interesting what they'll do in Green Bay. I'll tell you what, that situation with Aaron Rodgers, now the wide receiver's banged up, it wouldn't shock me if they threw up a dud.
Well, no, yeah, Rodgers has not looked the same with the knee injury. There's no doubt about it. He's limping too much. He's not mobile enough. It seems like he's having a hard time planting to get those deep throws going. So yeah, right now he's a little bit of a concern.
Could the Lions beat Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and still suck?
Yeah, they could actually do that. And still yeah, no doubt about it. Let's face it, Stafford can put up numbers like any one of these other guys in any given week. He's got the weapons around him as well. Three good wide receivers. He's got a running back that's really starting to come into his own with Kerryon Johnson. So absolutely, these guys could really they could surprise Green Bay and still not finish the year very well.
It's very, very sad. Now, the Titans play the Bills this week, and one of the things that we talked about earlier in the show, we were going to talk is Corey Davis. You all in on him against the Buffalo Bills?
I'm never all in on Corey Davis. He had a great week last week. I'll give him that. There's nothing I'm going to take away from that. But he hasn't been the guy everybody expected him to be. But Marcus Mariota finally had a good game. Yeah, it's a tough one for me. I'd like to see him do it again before I'm really ready to buy in on him wholeheartedly. But let's face it. I mean, the Buffalo defense is not as strong as it once was, but it's not as bad as people think it was either. So far on the season, they're 15th against the opposing wide receivers, 21st against quarterbacks. They've given up over 1,100 yards and 8 scores while only taking 2 interceptions. So if Mariota's on his game again, then Davis should put up a decent number.
I'll tell you what, and we don't talk about him much, but watching the games this week, Marshawn Lynch is as good as he was in the Seattle uniform, it looks like it to me.
I totally agree. I own Lynch everywhere. I loved him coming into the season. He was ready to prove he's not done. I love when they show shots of him sitting on the bench when the defense is on the field and he's sitting there chewing on Skittles. I love that. I'm waiting for the one day they go to pan on him and he's sitting there smoking a J. But yeah, no, he looks strong. He got that touchdown taken away by the refs last week. And that might be the ref that they were paying off because he definitely blew that whistle way too early when you consider it was Marshawn Lynch fighting for yards.
Jim, before we let everyone go, Latavius Murray, if Mr. Dalvin Cook is not in the lineup, is Murray a must start for fantasy owners?
I hate to say that term must start because you never know who else they have and what other guys they have. But, I don't think he's a must start anyway because Philly is really tough against the run. They've only given up 160 yards on the ground. They've given up 169 through the air to running backs, but only one total touchdown in 4 games. Only 16.2 points allowed to the position on average a game. So, no, he doesn't become a must start, but depending on what your other choices are, he could be a start.
I'll tell you what, it was crazy when you think of running backs. But if you drafted him, you probably drafted him as a 4th or 5th running back, so you probably have somebody else there. So I would think, just like you, that, you know what, I wouldn't rush to throw him in my lineup. unless I was absolutely hurting at that position.
Yeah, it really comes down to not every opportunity is going to give you fantasy goodness. Just because somebody gets the opportunity, you really have to take in everything that comes into play. You have to consider the defense they're going against, whether they're home, whether they're away, what the weather is going to be like. You really do need to take this stuff into account before you're ready to just throw him in there because he is starting.
Chris Carson, of course, hit the injury report today again with the did not practice. Seattle's running back situation we talked about early in the show. Amari Cooper has been limited in practice. Larry Fitzgerald did not practice. Jim, that's the roundup. That's the podcast for the week as we go into week 5 of the National Football League season.
That's right, folks. And please do us a favor. Give us a like, give us a rating, whatever you can. Give us a comment. We'd love to see it. Anything you can do to help us grow this podcast, we definitely appreciate it. We appreciate you guys for coming and listening. We appreciate all the people in the chat room asking us questions and interacting with us. And, we will definitely see you guys next week. Everybody, good luck in week 5. We are out.